So welcome, my name is Oscar Iván Zambrano, my pronouns are he, him, his, él en español, and I am the current president of the Medical Organization for Latino Advancement, and we are thrilled to have yet another event in association with our partner, Latinx Health Talk Therapy, Latinx Talk Therapy, and their leader and founder, Ernestina Perez, who's also a member of our organization. MOLA is a professional trade organization that is rooted in our communities. So it's a combination. We do provide scholarships and mentorship, especially in research, to Latinx Latinos in our communities aspiring to be healthcare professionals. Most of our membership, which is about 1,700 members, it's a membership-based organization, are in the field of medicine, and we want to expand to behavioral health. So we do have some behavioral health professionals, but we want to have more. It's about representation. If we see the different professions in the US, Latinx are not even 10% in any of the healthcare professions, and yet we are almost 20% of the population. So there is a huge disparity. That disparity is not going to be solved if we don't do something ourselves. They're not going to do it for us. They're not going to promote it for us. We're not part of any major policy at the government level or at the corporate level when it comes to the private enterprises. We need to create our own spaces. And we need to do it now, because many of you might have already realized, but if you don't, please know this. If we were to have a president of the United States, Latino, Latina, Latine, that person was already born. The next generation of leaders, Latino leaders in our country, has been already born. So we need to make sure that they have the path. And that's what we are trying to build here. So to talk to you a little bit about MOLA, we have scholarships and mentorship, and we also have a leadership branch through the voluntarism that represents most of our members. We have a core number of volunteers that run the organization. I'm a volunteer as well. So with that, I'm gonna invite you to visit our booth downstairs. And Latinx also Talk Therapy has a booth there. So please pass by, become a member. We're giving a promotion today, so you can become a member. And we want to ask some of you to help us build a portfolio of services for behavioral health professionals. So anyone that is interested in being a member and helping us build that, we're gonna create a group with some of you behavioral health professionals. And having said that, I'm gonna give the baton to our expert speakers today. So we have Zuli Ramirez, and by the way, Zuli and Ernestina are not gemelas. They are not gemelas. They're just both of them extremely beautiful and representative of our community. So we have other two panelists, that is Christian and I'm bad with names. Christian and Marilyn. And Marilyn, by the way, you are wearing a very, very beautiful Latinx themed outfit that I celebrate. So I'm gonna leave you with them, and let's have a very interesting conversation. So ask questions and be engaged. Thank you.
Oscar, gracias. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. Para mí es un verdadero placer. It's such an honor to be here today with Latinx Talk Therapy. Thank you so much, Ernestina, for the invitation. Thank you so much, panelists, for being here today and share with us your expertise. So before I begin, I want to thank you guys. I want to thank you as health providers. I want to thank you for the work that you do, for your commitment to the community. Mental health is such an important issue right now. And as first generation Latinx individuals, health providers, you guys also face challenges and barriers. And today, You guys are gonna walk us through, you guys are gonna teach us, you're gonna talk about those barriers, those challenges, and how we navigate the system. And also, you guys are gonna teach us coping mechanisms, coping strategies on how to overcome those barriers. Because believe it or not only health providers go through a lot of stress and a lot of mental health issues. So I'm gonna be learning a lot as a journalist as well, because there's a lot of stress in my industry too. So I would like to start by asking each one of you to introduce yourself really briefly and tell us what you do. Ernestina, yes, we're not sisters.
A ver, can you hear me okay? Yeah, so my name is Ernestina Perez. I'm the founder and CEO of Latinx Talk Therapy. We're a mental health clinic that provides culturally sensitive therapy and immigration services to the Latino community in Illinois. So here's some of our staff, our clinicians that are going to be introducing themselves. I guess a little bit about me. I was born in la Ciudad de Mexico and I immigrated when I was 7 with my family. I was part of the ESL program. You know, English is my second language. I was undocumented until I was about 19 and I became a U.S. citizen in 2015. And since then, I've been in the Chicago area and I've really liked being here and being part of the Latinx community. And I'm really glad that we had an opportunity to network and meet all of you.
Buenas tardes, mi nombre es Marilyn Rodríguez, orgullosamente mexicana, hija de padre migrante, orgullosamente guerrerense, y soy una psicoterapeuta bilingüe en Latinx Talk Therapy y estoy apasionada de normalizar conversaciones de salud mental en nuestra comunidad.
Hi everyone, my name is Cristian Gomez, también de padres mexicanos, born and raised on the southwest side of Chicago. And even though I was born and raised here in Chicago, I was also in ESL at a very young age. But I'm also a bilingual psychotherapist, and I've been with Latinx Talk Therapy, I believe, going on 4 years now. So very happy to be here.
How important is to have this service in our language, right? Nowadays, in the Latino community, mental health has always been a taboo. Nowadays, people are more open about it and we can talk about it. But growing up, that was not a thing. It was not. So, but let's start about the experiences and that impact that you guys have had as first generation individuals, first generation Latinx individuals. Christian, let's start with you.
Yeah, definitely. I think one of the things that comes to mind being first generation Latinx, being a healthcare provider, one of the things that comes to mind is just the multiple roles that a lot of the times we have to fill within our families, within our professions as well. I think all of us here, I'm sure, experience how much we have to put into our work, into our profession, whether we're already practicing, whether we're therapists, physicians, nurses. It's a difficult job, right? We enjoy it, we love what we do, but it can also be stressful. And mixing that in with some of the responsibilities of being first generation, I'm sure a lot of you have also experienced having to take time to maybe having to translate for our parents, having to help them fill out forms, accompanying them to appointments, right? Whatever the case may be. And again, things that we enjoy doing, but it can become a lot. It can become overwhelming, right? And I think something we can try to do with that a lot of the time is working on setting boundaries, right? I think boundaries are very important. And putting the cultural piece to this is we understand that a lot of the times in the Latinx communities, boundaries with our families can be something difficult to do, right? I know if it's saying no to my mom, ooh.
Mija, ven a ayudarme.
Exactly.
Ven a ayudarme ahora mismo que no entiendo esto.
Exactly. It's hard, right? It's difficult. And sometimes maybe it's not realistic to just set a black and white boundary and say, ¿sabes qué, ama? Hoy no. Ooh, it's tough, right?
La chancla.
La chancla, ¿verdad? Yeah, it's hard, right? So we want to be able to at least name that and say, hey, it's not always this easy, because family is a big part of our life, right? And a lot of the times those boundaries are not respected. And it's not because others mean well. A lot of the times, maybe our families don't understand the obligations and the pressures that come with practicing in the health field, and just how much that can be, right? So can we work on setting some type of boundary, meeting in the middle, maybe saying, ¿sabes qué, ma? I know that you need help filling out these forms, pero ahorita no puedo. I'm busy, I need to rest, something's going on, ¿qué tal mañana? Can we come back to it later on? Can we come back to it on the weekend? Trying to work within what we have, because we understand it's not always easy to just set that boundary.
I think that's such a great advice. I actually learned setting boundaries from Ernestina, because she's like, amiga, you need to set boundaries. And I always remember that from her. So thank you, Christian, for that advice. Now, Marilyn, pardon. Can you share some examples of specific challenges faced by this demographic and how they affect their mental health?
Yes, absolutely. And so one of the challenges that I have faced myself as a Latina is it comes with gender roles, right? Como mujeres, como Latinas, ¿verdad? Yo crecí en una casa super strict, right? Very traditional, where I was expected to, help in the kitchen, to clean, do chores, do laundry for everybody else, or at least the men in the house. And so one very specific example, right, that for me resonates a lot is that, like, thinking about the expectations among genders and learning how to find a balance, right? How to be able to communicate the expectations that I have for myself, right? It was very difficult for me to tell my abuelita, yo no quiero estar en la cocina, ¿verdad? Or to let her know that, like, I had to do homework, right? And that I couldn't go help her when she needed me. Going back to, like, the importance of setting boundaries, but also making sure that we're setting expectations, that we communicate not only what is expected of us, but what we expect from ourselves.
Can you tell us really quick, like, how will you say it, right? Because sometimes the way we say things, they can come across rude or nice, right? So is there a way you will say, okay, you can say this? Can you tell us, like, what can we say specifically?
Bueno, con mi abuelita es muy difícil porque tiene un carácter muy fuerte.
Precisamente por eso es importante saber cómo hablarles.
Solo, I've had to repeat it so many times with her, right? But an example could be, Grandma, right now I really have to work, or focus on this work responsibility that I have. I am happy to support you, cleaning the table when I'm done, but I can't help you right now, right? And really it's the learning how to say no, right? Being confident and assertive with, like, no, ahorita no puedo, like, te puedo ayudar con esto o podemos tratar otra vez mañana.
La abuelita va a estar sentida. Thank you, Marilyn. So how do systemic barriers, let's talk about the systemic barriers, because there's so many barriers that we face as first generation Latinx individuals, but how do systemic barriers intersect with the challenges faced by us, first generation Latinx individuals? I don't know if you want to take it, or Christian or Marilyn.
However you guys want.
Go ahead, Ernestina.
All right, well, what can I say? I feel like, yes, I think a lot of us would be maybe the first professionals in our family. So with that, it's not even just carrying those responsibilities, right, of being a healthcare professional, but also, like, what are we up against, right? Not being maybe part of the majority culture. And I know my experience being undocumented, I definitely felt that for a long time. And when you think about cultural sensitivity in therapy, what comes to mind is, like, how I was internalizing that psychologically, that narrative, right, of what it meant to be maybe undocumented or feeling oppression or not feeling like I belonged. And so I think being able to process that, and having support for that is really important. And I think just continuous conversations, right? Like, getting everybody together and talking about their experiences at work. And I think really learning how to advocate for ourselves, which is something that Oscar was mentioning, and it takes a lot of leadership and I think a continuous conversation, because there is a lot of different things in terms of like the gap that exists, not just in mental health services, but in all professions really, even especially like healthcare, right? Like how many Latinx therapists are there? I mean, only 5% speak Spanish, right? How many physicians, how many nurses, right, are Latinx or speak Spanish? So I think it's just continuously being mindful of that. And I don't know if you guys have anything else to add to that.
How about the workload? I believe that you have like a lot of case loads, right? For example, how do we manage that stress? I feel like as Latinos, companies tend to throw so much work to us, and we don't say no. We say, okay, you can be super stressed out, you have a lot of things at home, and yet you have a lot of work, and they continue to give you more work, and you cannot say no. How do you manage that at the workplace? How do you say no to your boss when you have a lot of work already?
Yeah, I think that's a great point, right? Because what comes up in terms of systemic barriers, lack of representation, right? What does lack of representation mean then for us that are in the field and are doing our best to work with the community? A lot of the times, like you're saying, that can lead to just heavy caseloads. Something I hear often is we have a room full of, we have an X number of patients in the waiting room who are Spanish speaking. Go call Marilyn because she's the only Spanish speaker we have here today. So now what happens? Now Marilyn has to drop what she's doing. This is added work. Maybe this is something that others don't have to really deal with or experience, right? So with that, an important piece is learning how to say no, setting those boundaries again, right? But then also just practicing self-care and making sure that we're taking care of ourselves, right? So what does that mean? That looks different for everyone, right? What is it that you all enjoy? Is it exercising, going out for a walk, reading, hobbies, things like this, right? So self-care, practicing to say no, and setting those boundaries are some ways that we can try to navigate that in our system. But with that, this is why it's so important for organizations such as MOLA to exist, right? Because we need more of us out there and in leadership positions as well.
A leader that can understand too, right? That we're not machines, and that we're also humans, and that we also need to take care of our mental health in order to be productive. Thank you, Christian. So let's talk about now, Ernestina, what steps can be taken to promote inclusivity, right? I think now inclusivity is more important than ever, and address these barriers.
Well, I think for organizations, I think maybe if they have Latinx employees, creating some kind of organization or allowing a space for people to come together and process, what the workload is or what they're coming up against, and then be able to support them. And I think as employees, I think really going and engaging, right, in those different organizations and making sure that you're, using your voice to express what you need, which is a skill in itself. For example, at Latinx Talk Therapy, we try to do a lot of leadership building. Like we have a Latina leadership team, which is really great, and we're launching a new initiative to do leadership with the clinicians. But I think if you speak to leadership, the skills to do that is a journey as well, right? So it's not just taking on like executive positions or positions of power where you're making decisions that are going to impact other people. But like we're saying, there's so many things culturally that arise when you're trying to go into those roles. And that's where you might need additional support. So really making sure that you allow yourself to get the space to process, or, whether it's with your family or deepening relationships you have with your friends or professionals, just making sure that you can feel heard and supported in that journey.
Do you want to add anything, Christian or Marilyn?
I can add something really quickly. In the last year, I have been focused on doing a lot of community engagement, so bringing a lot of mental health conversations into the community. And something that I've noticed is that there's a need, right? And a lot of organizations are willing to create the space for Latinos, you know, for people of color to have these conversations. And it's been so beautiful for me to be able to lead these conversations in spaces where, like, I never imagined that I would be a part of, right? Just this week, right, I was able to give a presentation on mental health and the experience of like navigating corporate America for Latinos, right? And I think it's really important that we start within ourselves and our circles, normalizing those conversations surrounding the challenges that we face.
You mentioned something very interesting, how to navigate corporate America. It's so difficult, right? As a Latino, first generation professional to navigate corporate America. I would like to ask you more about that. If you have any other advice for people that are starting, right, their careers as first generation Latinx, how do they navigate that without feeling that fear, without feeling that stress level of saying, you know, I don't see myself in that table, but yet that person is so smart and he has the skills, but doesn't believe in herself or himself because of that first generation challenge?
I mean, I guess what I would add is like just normalizing that it's okay if you feel afraid. It's all right, you know, it's not your fault. I know in psychology we use this term of like imposter syndrome, but we talk about like systemic oppression and all these different things that are up against, you know, a person when they're doing this journey to their professional goals. I think it's like you have to take that into account. So some of that is not just you. And I think just reflecting on like, what do I need? Sometimes finding a mentor or somebody just to talk to so that you could just practice like what you're gonna say, that will make a difference. And then just getting emotional support around it, because it is really hard. I think the way that corporate America works, you really have to advocate for yourself. If not, you're kind of left behind. And culturally, I mean, I would say as a Latina, you know, nobody kind of raised me to be outspoken like that. It was more passive, more quiet, you know, hasta me decían, calladita te ves bonita, así me dice mi papá. So I think trying to challenge that, right? And just saying, hey, it's okay if I feel stressed out or I feel scared, like that's part of what we're up against, and that's why it's so important to come together, right? And in different experiences, kind of like this, where you're celebrating your identity and your culture, and you do feel a sense of belonging so that you don't feel alone in that experience professionally.
Do you want to add anything to that, Christian, Marilyn?
I think Ernestina did great.
But tell us about your own experience. You are first generation. Marilyn, would you like to share like maybe like a personal anecdote?
Yo creo que algo de lo que a mí se me hacía muy difícil was showing up as my authentic self. So I remember, you know, when I started off, I was always the youngest one in the team. Era la única mujer trying to like navigate these conversations about what our communities need in rooms filled with men. And anytime I wanted to speak, I remember at first, like I would get like really shaky. I would walk out of meetings and I wanted to cry. And sometimes I would cry, right? Or sometimes I'd get a little louder, right? And I wouldn't say I was loud. I was just really passionate about what I share and what I like to, you know, bring awareness about. And for me, it was like embracing that, right? That it was okay for me to be emotional, and that it wasn't okay for somebody to tell me, oh, you're just being aggressive, right? Like, no es que estoy siendo agresiva, es que me apasiona de lo que hablo, y me apasiona el poder traer los recursos a mi comunidad también. And so it was, I don't know what it was, because I used to be really shy. I remember, you know, in grammar school, I used to read, you know, whatever paragraph it was my turn to read, I would go over it like 100 times before it was my turn. And then something that really helps is just seeing my people, right? Me encanta estar con mi gente, y el ver personas que se ven como yo me hace sentir muy bien de estar aquí.
Y que estas personas que se ven como nosotros estén en el mismo cuarto donde se hacen las decisiones, ¿no? Donde está el poder para hacer los cambios necesarios para nuestras comunidades. Cristian, ¿quieres añadir algo?
Yeah, I'll just add a little bit. For me, I went to UIC for my undergrad, and which is a very diverse school compared to a lot of other universities. So I was lucky enough to be in a school that provided different types of resources. I was part of MOLA, I believe it still exists. It's a health-oriented Latino association, right? So I was very intentional about surrounding myself with like-minded people who were similar to me, kind of like Ernestina was saying, right? So finding and joining organizations that support what you're trying to achieve, right? That's something that was very helpful for me. It helped me just learn more about what I wanted to do, exploring different careers, different fields. And it was just so much support because, like you're saying, there was definitely that doubt that came up for me. Y me cuestionaba, right? It would happen. So having others for support was just very impactful for me. So I would say just being able to find resources, right, that are out there.
Y me estás quitando mi próxima pregunta because I was going to ask you about the resources. What resources are out there for first generation Latinx health professionals so that they can help us navigate the system?
Yeah, well, definitely resources such as at schools, right? Organizations, again, such as MOLA. But another big one is when it comes to first gen, managing the stress, working on mental health is therapy, right? That's a big one, right? That's why we're also here. But I think in order to make sure that our community are actually using these resources, I think a big point with mental health is just breaking down that stigma that continues to exist today. I believe that we're heading in the right direction. I think we're getting better with it, but there's still a lot of work to do, right? And so how do we break down those stigmas? How do we normalize therapy or just even mental health in general? I think we just need to talk about it. We need to talk about it more. We need to have these types of spaces where we can talk about it, but even more so, talking about it outside of these spaces, right? Talk about it with friends, family, if you're comfortable, right? If you're comfortable. But I think that a big reason that a lot of us don't feel comfortable with this is one, for me, I'm sure for a lot of you as well, it's just something that wasn't talked about growing up. Right? How can we talk about it if we don't even know it's
No,
there?
si decías que estabas deprimida, ya te decían, mija, estás loca.
Exactly.
¿Sí o no?
Ponte a lavar los trastes.
Ponte a lavar los trastes, ponte a limpiar. Tienes mucho tiempo.
Exactly, right? Exactly. So, and I think in talking about it and sharing personal stories, I think that it can go a long way, right? So with that, quickly, I want to share what my first experience was with therapy and then just even mental health in general. So at the age of 14 is when I first started seeing a therapist. I was diagnosed with obsessive compulsive disorder, so OCD. I had began experiencing those symptoms at around the age of 10. It was a very difficult moment in my life. It got bad. A couple years later, I decided to tell my mom about it. My mom. Love her.
Nuestras mamás, las amamos.
Yes, and I told her and I explained to her as best as I could because I couldn't even put words to what I was feeling. So as best as I could, I told her what I was experiencing, and she says, "Pues no pienses en eso. Se te va a quitar." And she meant well, right? She meant well. She also she didn't know what to do. What did that?
Like, I don't think we cannot blame them either.
Exactly.
Right?
That's a big piece. We're not blaming, we're understanding, right? And she just didn't have the resources, right? What did that mean for me? That meant that I had to keep working through it as best as I could.
Pero ¿cómo lo hicieron? Porque ella te estaba diciendo, mijo, que mejor piensa en otra cosa, que se te olvide eso. How do you end up, being diagnosed?
So, couple years, I struggled with it on my own. That's just how it was. Eventually, I don't know what happened. Something happened, and at age 14, she says, "Mijo, ¿te sigue pasando eso? Lo que me habías dicho?" And I'm like, "Yeah, it doesn't just go away." And she says, "Pues, let's go to the doctor." And I was like, "Nope, no." She lied to me and says, "Well, we have to go to the doctor because you have a physical." It was the summer before starting high school, so it made sense. show up to the doctor and she's like, well, we're actually here because of what you told me. And I was so angry, like so angry. And at the time, what I was feeling, which I understand now, I didn't know this back then, is that I was angry because I was embarrassed, I was scared, and the big one, I was ashamed because I felt that what I was going through, that there was something wrong with me. And I felt like I was the only one that was experiencing that. How am I gonna tell a stranger all of these thoughts that I'm having and these behaviors that I'm doing? No, right? But ya dijo mi mamá, right? So I had no option. And I will never forget the anger that I felt, but I will also never forget the relief that I experienced when I was talking to the therapist and he said to me, yeah, that sounds like OCD. There's people who deal with that. And he said it with such a sense of compassion, kindness, understanding, no judgment, that it just felt like such a weight off my shoulders, right? And that was the start that literally changed my life.
Wow, Cristian. Por favor, un aplauso para Cristian, porque creo, Cristian, déjame decirte, creo que es muy importante la experiencia que tú pasaste como niño. Y que hoy en día, now you're that professional, right? That professional that can change someone else's mindset or help them. So thank you for sharing that personal story. Marilyn, would you like to add something? Because I saw you.
Me voy a llevar todo el día contando mi historia.
Bueno, ¿cuántos minutos tengo? Hay tiempo.
Creo que para mí algo que ha sido siempre muy importante is bringing awareness, right? I go back to like just normalizing these conversations. Hasta este día, I keep, educating my family on what I do. Because a veces me dicen, ¿y nada más escuchas a la gente o qué haces? So it's really educating, right? Educating our families of like, no, right? I'm not just sitting here listening to people. I'm, helping them understand these patterns, these behaviors that are not helping them function the way that they would like according to their lifestyles or the changes that they want to see in their life. And so something that, is really important is that education piece, right? Letting people know that therapy is not just a place that you go when you experience a traumatic event. That you can go to therapy just to learn to love yourself, right? To learn how to set boundaries, to practice different stressors, right, that you may be facing, but it doesn't necessarily have to be because of a traumatic event.
Es que setting boundaries es muy difícil a veces, ¿no? Especialmente de donde nosotros venimos. Culturalmente no nos han enseñado a decir que no. Es siempre decir, okay, yo te ayudo un ratito, or, I'll help you a little bit, okay, I'll be there, but we don't come from a culture of saying no, right? We come from a culture of like hard workers, vamos a echarle pa'lante, a luchar por nuestros sueños, and that's not a no. So setting boundaries, very important. How do you do that, Ernestina? How do you set boundaries?
Well, I think it's a process, right? Because you have to find your own balance. And it is about saying yes to yourself in some ways, right? And so if you think of it that way, if you're feeling, burnt out or you're feeling so fatigued emotionally, how much can you really help other people, right? And so that energy is you're rippling that out. And so just being mindful, what I tend to do a lot is just carve out some time to be with myself and just kind of like a reflection period and just think about, what's inside of me right now, how I've been feeling, what am I saying yes to? And it gets tricky in my position of leadership. It's like there's so many great things that we could say yes to and projects and things that feel like, they're very important to do. But I think the mindfulness of understanding, how valuable your health is and then taking the time to really know that, unless you live in maybe an abusive environment or something traumatic of the sort. Outside of that, like your life really reflects to you your deepest beliefs about yourself, right? So if there's things that you see where there's problems in relationships or there's situations that you're not happy or fulfilled in, it's really up to you to slow down and ask yourself like, okay, how did I get here? And what is it that I really want to do? And then how do I encourage myself to get out of this, right? And so I take things like that to therapy. And then I, with the help of therapists like Cristian and Marilyn, really process how to use my energy to focus on healthy skills for saying no, healthy skills for, taking time management, for focusing on improving myself, for learning new things, as opposed to sitting there and kind of resisting the situation or maybe blaming other people and things like that. So it's an ongoing process, but therapy obviously very helpful, and just self-reflection.
And that's when I want to talk about it, because we have a wonderful resource here called Latinx Talk Therapy, founded by my very friend here, Ernestina Perez. First generation, very proud of you. I have to say this because you started from scratch, and she's the founder of Latinx, the brain behind Latinx Talk Therapy. So congratulations for that. And I want to talk about Latinx therapy. I know you want to add something, but I do want to talk about Latinx Talk Therapy because this is a great resource. You have, I have to say I'm her friend, I'm her amiga. So she talks to me about the stress that she goes through, but she's so committed. You're so committed to what you do, Tina. I'm sorry, I'm calling you Tina right here in front, but you're so committed to and you believe in it, and you want to provide this to the community because you really, really know what it's like. Can you talk to us about Latinx Talk Therapy and what can we find? Because obviously, we're talking about all these mechanisms that it's important, but how do we knock that first door, right, for help? And that's when, we see Latinx Talk Therapy. How do I, pick up the phone and call Latinx Talk Therapy?
Yeah, so before I talk a little bit about how you get started, what I would say is, the whole intention behind Latinx Talk Therapy was bringing together Latinx mental health professionals that also spoke Spanish and had that cultural understanding from their own lived experiences. And to me, it's just such a dream to have such a supportive team that comes together and is really defining what Latinx mental health is and how all of these, evidence-based practices that we learn in our education and training, how they really work with our community. So being able to see people come into the clinic, or even when we have consultations talking about the problems that we're seeing and what's working and what's not working, we take that, we take that to heart. And obviously me having, navigated those struggles on my own, I really do believe in mental health, and so does everybody I think that works in the organization. And so for that, I'm just, so happy that we have that mission and then we're part of that impact. But if people want to get started, which is amazing, or somebody that you would like to refer, especially for healthcare professionals, like you see a lot of people, you're hearing a lot of things. I think it's as easy as normalizing and saying, hey, I know a place where, they are culturally sensitive, hablan español también, all you have to do is call and you can get more information. We have our staff here, Griselda and Denise, who are always helping us out with that, helping people find their best fit therapists, helping people understand a little bit about how insurances work. We also have a sliding scale and a graduate internship program, which does pro bono therapy group as well. And so I think it's just about checking it out. You can go to our website, latinxtalktherapy.com, and read about the bios and see who's a good fit. And I also encourage people, if you feel that you didn't connect with your therapist, that's okay. That happens.
That happens a lot.
Yeah, it happens. I've been in therapy for a long time, and I've had so many different types of therapy modalities and different therapists I've learned from, anything from psychoanalysis to EMDR to terapia en español, you name it, I love it. And so we always are what we want to do is help destigmatize mental health. So if you call our client care coordinator and say, hey, you know what, that wasn't a good fit, we'll help match you with somebody else or give you a referral. I think the intention is for people to continue their self-growth journey.
Another thing that I have to say that I learned from Ernestina was mindful eating, because every time I will go out and eat with her, I will ask the same thing and I'm an eater. I love to eat. And I will eat my whole plate, and she will just eat like 1/4 of her plate. And I'll be like, Ernestina, why, you're not hungry anymore? And she's like, mindful eating, amiga. I learned so much about mindful eating. So mindful eating, I learned so much from her too. So sorry, I had to throw that out. What is like the first session? So if I I make my appointment, what can you tell us a little bit about what it's like to be in that first session of therapy? Whoever would like to answer.
Do you have any pointers?
No se peleen, no se peleen.
The initial session, really, it's like a get to know you, right? Like, think about dating, right? ¿Qué preguntas haces on the first date, right? Really, it's you identifying if your therapist is a good fit, if you feel comfortable, right? If you walk away from that session feeling like you couldn't express yourself, right? It's really important that you self-reflect and ask yourself, right? Did I feel safe in this space? Did I feel understood? Did I feel like this person can meet my needs? And so that first session, it's a way for you to also interview your therapist, right? Your therapist is going to come to you and it's going to ask you all these questions of what brings you in today, right? What are the patterns that you're seeing? What are the changes that you're seeing? But it's also an opportunity for you to ask your therapist, right? Well, what are the modalities that you practice, right? Or how long have you been in this field, and what are your specialties, right? Or what clients do you usually see? It goes vice versa, right? It's an opportunity for your therapist to get to know you, but also you to get to know your therapist.
Anything else you would like to add, Christian and Ernestina?
I think Marilyn did a great job at explaining that, and she really did. But I think just one thing I'll add, right, is something to keep in mind, maybe, right? If you are looking for something specific, right? If you are looking, sometimes clients prefer certain age ranges, right? For whatever reason, right? Race, ethnicity, language, but then also if you're looking for something in particular, right? So if you're looking for someone that works with, that focuses on trauma, or that works with ADHD, or that specializes in working with depression or anxiety, right? Those are also some things to just keep in mind and consider as you're searching for a therapist.
Ernestina?
Well, I would say it's a transformative journey. You know, life, you're going to experience all kinds of things, and you don't have to do that alone. And so the whole intention is giving yourself a space to just kind of process things. And you'll feel the clarity. Like, I love going to therapy because, I mean, sometimes I go in there, I'm like, I don't even know what to say. You know, where do I get started? Some days are good, some days are not. But I think the idea that you can just leave it there, it's confidential. The intention of a therapist is not to judge you or tell you what to do. It's really to empower you, for you to know who you are, to know yourself, what you stand for, to feel authentic in that. And so I just always tell people to give it at least a try. You know, it's up to you if you want to stop, but I say give yourself the chance.
Give yourself a chance, right? Because I feel like, you know, how we grow up saying, okay, we need to go to the doctor, we need to go to physicals, but mental health, it's also very, very important to keep going, to be efficient, to be productive, right? We also need to take care of our minds. So important, right? La doctora Juanita me está viendo, yes, because you know you're a doctor, but it's so important to take care of our minds too. So thank you so much for all the advice that you have provided today. How much time do I have? 20 minutes. Okay. Let's open it up for questions. Anybody has a question in the panel?
Quizás will pass the microphone.
Gracias. Muy clara la explicación. Lo voy a hacer en español, lo podría hacer en inglés, pero es más fácil en español. Identificamos que tenemos un familiar que está teniendo serios problemas, pero que no quiere identificarlos, no quiere salir de ahí, simplemente está en el proceso de rabia, de ira, pero no sabemos cuál es la razón. ¿De qué forma podemos llegar a él o a ella para decirle, ok, estás necesitando una ayuda, yo no te la puedo dar, pero te puedo guiar? Porque es muy difícil que acepten ir a una terapia. Entonces, ¿de qué forma se puede facilitar ese diálogo para, entre comillas, convencerlo de que vaya a ese tipo de ayuda.
And I'll translate her question. What's your name?
Claudia.
Claudia, gracias por tu pregunta. Creo que es una excelente pregunta. She talks about family members. When you know there's something wrong, but they don't want to seek help, how do you make them seek that help?
Well, I would say you really can't make anyone that's an adult, go to therapy. That has to be something from within them, and everybody's kind of on their own journey. Some people have to go through some really difficult things to be like, oh, I need to go, right? But I think it's like if you love somebody, you care about them, I think just reflecting that to them, like, hey, you're my great friend. Like, I know that you've been telling me you've been having this issue, or I hear you telling me that you have this, argument with this person, or maybe I've seen you, you've been having a lot of rage recently. Have you noticed? I mean, all you could do is reflect it back to them, gently, and then say, why don't you give this a shot? But the method that I believe is like you can just be a role model for what you're saying. So if they see you with a healthy mental health and you're taking care of yourself, I mean, people are going to notice that, and then you're just going to say, what you're doing to take care of yourself. That might be beneficial. Otherwise, I mean, if it's like suicidal ideation or something more severe, sometimes you can call for support. Somebody needs to get hospitalized and things like that. I don't know if Marilyn, Christian have anything to add to that.
I really like the idea of like modeling, right, to the other person what your experience has been. I think that for me, something that's helped is just talking about my journey, right? Hey, I struggled with this, and this is how therapy helped me, right? And this is how I can seek therapy, and being that role model for them, really, right? Because sometimes it's scary, right? What do you mean I'm going to talk to a stranger about, my problems that I don't talk to anybody else? So really, it's just letting them know, hey, this is what it can look like. And also, maybe you don't have to do it alone, right? If it's a family member, you can always say, how about we try family therapy together? How about I walk with you to the support group? How about I attend this event with you so that we can both get informed about what support is out there for you?
Family support is so important, right? You cannot force them. That's what I'm understanding here, is that you cannot force that family member to go, right? But that family support, it's key, I think. Christian?
Yeah, definitely. Like we talked about earlier, family within the Latinx community is huge, right? So let's show that support, and I think that also goes back to normalizing mental health and therapy, right? If possible, from a young age, right? Because then, si nos esperamos until once things are really difficult or someone's in a really bad point in their life, and then we want to start normalizing. I'm not saying we shouldn't, right? But if we're able to get a head start on it, I think that can also be really helpful.
Como ir al dentista o como ir a hacerse un físico con un médico.
Exactly.
Muy bien. ¿Contestamos a la pregunta? Gracias a ti. Ok, adelante.
I want to talk about something very important. Once you go through the transformative journey as Hispanics, that we're starting the journey, it gets very lonely, because it gets to a point where your family, is reaching out to this individual that now looks like a stranger. And so now you start to maneuver different feelings and emotions with your therapist as, okay, what do I do now? I am okay with setting boundaries, but how do I get the support that I need now that I'm in this next step? Any comments from our panelists regarding to this point?
¿Quién quiere contestar? Ernestina.
Well, I mean, that's a great question. I think that the part where you're transforming and changing, I think that's why people sometimes don't go to therapy, right? Because it is going to change things. And if you want to stay the way that you are now, then you probably aren't going to grow, right? And so sometimes when you grow and you implement all these things, but your family is not meeting you there, it can be isolating and lonely. That's so true.